pleased to join my friend and colleague, Senator Barrasso, to speak on behalf of the nomination of Nicole Nason to serve as Administrator of the Federal Highway Administration. Ms. Nason is currently serving as the Assistant Secretary for Administration at the State Department. Right now, though, there's no administrator leading the Federal Highway Administration. In fact, it's been more than 2 years since we've had an administrator in charge at that important agency. The last time our country, Mr. President, went this long without top leadership at the Federal Highway Administration was more than 100 years ago. Back when the agency was known as the Bureau of Public Roads. Henry Ford had just introduced the Model T, and the idea of speedy and safe transcontinental travel was still far outside of our imagination and even further from being realized. Today, the Federal Highway Administration oversees more than 220,000 miles of our national highway system and some 145,000 bridges. The sad truth is that many of these roadways, many of these bridges are in poor, in some cases even dangerous condition, having been in use far beyond the intended duration of their original design. Moments from now, when Ms. Nason is confirmed, and I hope that she will be, but confirmed to be our administrator, I think she's going to inherit responsibilities and political realities far more challenging and complex than perhaps all of her predecessors. As our next administrator, Ms. Nason will find herself at the center of a national crisis because our Highway Trust Fund is going broke and the system of paying for it is broken. Last year, Mr. President, we spent about $11 billion more from the Highway Trust Fund than we collected in revenues. When that happens, the Highway Trust Fund turns over to the General Fund and the Treasury and says, how about $11 billion? The General Fund doesn't have the $11 billion. And so what Treasury does is issue debt in order to finance the hole in the Trust Fund, the General Fund, so we can actually fund the hole in the Highway Trust Fund. It is crazy. To pay for the FAST Act, in fact, we took $70 billion from the General Fund and other programs. For the next transportation bill, Mr. President, we need to find an additional $68 billion just to prevent the Highway Trust Fund from going broke for 4 or 5 more years and to keep our programs at the current funding level. But we all know that the current funding isn't sufficient either. And despite spending more than we collect, we still aren't spending enough. The backlog of money needed to rehabilitate and improve highways and bridges in this country has grown to $800 billion. $800 billion is the backlog for roads, highways, and bridges. So, Mr. President, the 800-pound gorilla in the room is really an $800 billion gorilla. And we got to figure out how we're going to pay to maintain, or better yet, rebuild and modernize our roads, our highways, our bridges, and transit system. That should be near the top of our to-do list. Not just the Senate, not just the House, not just the Congress, not just the administration, all of us together. Well, whether it's fair or not, Ms. Nason's job as administrator will be made either easier or all the more difficult by Congress's ability or inability, the administration's ability or inability to responsibly address that 800-pound gorilla. On the topic of paying for infrastructure, I was encouraged to hear from Ms. Nason at her confirmation hearing that she believes, and I quote, all options are on the table. Her words, all options are on the table. I welcome those words. We also discussed several other policy-related concerns that Ms. Nason will need to begin addressing on day one at the Federal Highway Administration. Too many pedestrians, too many bicyclists, too many drivers put their lives at risk when they use our roadways. 2 years ago, in 2017, there were more than 37,000 fatalities on our nation's roadways. In that same year, nearly 7,000 non-motorized users were killed. That is unacceptable. I was encouraged that during her confirmation hearing, Ms. Nason promised that she would have a focus on safety at the agency and work closely with NHTSA and others to improve information sharing with states, with localities, and tribal communities. Too many Americans, Mr. President, lack access to reliable transit or safe places to walk or to bike. And in some states, my state, we've done a lot in the last 20, 25 years, a lot more to do, and frankly, we can learn from other states, and maybe one or two of them can learn from us. Meanwhile, our country's public transportation networks should connect people to commerce and opportunity in every zip code, not just some of them, in every zip code. In too many instances, disadvantaged communities are spatially disconnected from commerce and from opportunity. Lower-income neighborhoods are often far from good-paying job opportunities, or safe and dependable transit options don't exist for those working outside of an 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. schedule. Our country's public transportation networks should lift up disadvantaged communities, lift them up. Federal Highway Administration must be a strong federal partner in that effort. Too many drivers lack access to charging stations for electric vehicles and hydrogen fueling stations for fuel cell-powered vehicles. This is especially frustrating for those who made investments in this technology but may not have feasible options to use those investments. Mr. President, that brings us to the glaring reality of climate change and its worsening impact on our infrastructure. Our vehicles, our travel patterns exacerbate the effects of climate change, and mobile sources are our nation's largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. I want to say that again. Our vehicles and travel patterns accelerate and exacerbate the effects of climate change. And mobile sources, our cars, our trucks, our vans, are our nation's largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in this country and on the planet. Meanwhile, increasingly frequent and extreme weather events are continuing to erode our transportation networks. We see it in my state. My guess is we see it in every other state that's represented here. Sea level rise threatens the structural integrity and longevity of our roads and bridges. I see it. We're the lowest lying state in America, Delaware is. Seas are rising. That's not a good combination. The challenges are great, but here's the good news. So are the opportunities. Challenges are great, but so are the opportunities. Today, I'm supporting the nomination of Ms. Nason because I believe that the key to success of any organization I've ever been a part of, always leadership. Navy, State of Delaware's governor, here. And right now, the Federal Highway Administration needs a top leader. And I believe in Ms. Nason, they'll have one. I think and I hope, but I believe, more than just hope, I believe she's going to prove to be a partner with Congress and work with us to address some of the many challenges that I've laid out and the many challenges before us in the months and years ahead. I would call on all of our colleagues, Democrat and Republican, a couple of independents, to vote, to rise up later today when the vote is taken and vote in favor of her nomination.